My name is Duncan Campbell, and I'm a councillor with Taupo District Council. Over the past few months, New Zealand has found itself discussing the biggest changes to local government since the Auckland reforms in 2010, and before that, the nationwide reforms of 1989. To date, most of the debate has been about boundaries and who merges with whom, but I think that's the wrong question. Before we decide who should govern together, we should decide how regional government ought to work. That's what Waikato Together is about, and it's the rules of the game which matter, not the players. The traditional model of councils is that the smaller fish are inevitably the losers, and that bigger is invariably only better for the largest town or city centres. We don't want that. The basis of Waikato Together is subsidiarity, which sounds like a complicated word, but it's actually very simple. It means that decisions get made at the lowest rung possible by the people who have to live with the consequences. Why are we even talking about reform of local government? Basically, the government decided that the present system needs reform because it is just too costly. And they gave us 3 months until 9th of August to come up with something better. I see this as a generational opportunity to influence change, and I hope you do too. Bigger can be better for everybody, but only if we get local voice back into the equation, which has been missing for way too long.
Okay, here we have it. Waikato Together. 3 distinct local areas, central, east and south, but the difference between this and the traditional council model is that we are building from the bottom up. Local communities with delegated decision making and budgets to decide local things that matter only to them. And above them, local boards to represent each district in their current council boundaries. This is the subsidiarity model of governing, whereby decisions get made at the most local level possible, with higher levels of authority only stepping in to address the bigger issues. So local communities first, then local boards, then local areas, central, east or south, and only after that, regional governance for the entire Waikato. 6 founding principles with subsidiarity as its first, but also local democracy, fair representation on a population basis, but not exclusively, regional strength, because the likes of Auckland have already demonstrated there is strength in size and purpose, stewardship, and last of all, accountability. No more decisions behind closed doors by people that nobody has ever heard of. Local decisions to get made locally and to be financed as such. Subsidiarity means respecting local decision making and referring to higher levels of governance only where it genuinely adds value. Apart from that, let's not overload regional governance with every nook and cranny decision, and instead let them get on with the big regional decisions. Remember, the rules of the game matter more than the players. Okay, what about representation at the regional level? Now, representation isn't just about population. It's also about making sure every part of the Waikato has a meaningful voice around the regional table. Here we have a chart roughly showing the proportional political influence to regional decision making by area. The formula used here is 3 guaranteed members for each region, with the rest by population. End result being of the 18 councillors on the regional board plus mayor, which make decisions on regional issues for the entire Waikato district. 9 of them come from central, with the remainder being split into eastern and southern. So even though central has around 65% of the region's population, they get 50% of the representation at regional level. This is one way of countering the urban centricity which might otherwise ensue. Okay, that was a brief look at the makeup of regional decision making, but how do we work out who gets to decide what? Again, the principle of subsidiarity, where decision making only gets delegated upward when it needs to. The lowest rung in this model is elected community committees, which is a glorified name for the more familiar community boards. But the difference is they have legislated decision making and budgets to decide local matters for themselves, e.g. streetscapes or playgrounds. In the taupo context, we're talking community committees for places like Turangi and Mangakino, which is something these places don't even have in the current council model. So let's take a look at southern local area, which comprises Taupo, South Waikato, Waitomo and Otorohanga. Each of these former districts gets 4, 3, 2 and 2 elected member councillors for a total of 11, with 4 of those being nominated to also appear in the regional council. And here we have central area with a total of 14 councillors, with 9 of their number being elected to regional council. And last, we have eastern area with 9 councillors electing 5 of their own to represent them in a regional council. These are the stages of transition from now to then, and all things going well could be in place by October 2028, or if things take a while to get established after the dust settles from this head start process, perhaps 2031. But these dates aren't the most important part. The important part is to get the model right so that local voice gets counted. So what is different about Waikato Together? As mentioned before, in your typical amalgamation, you get the bigger fish as winners and all the smaller fish get as the leftovers. There are some real benefits from being bigger, but the issue is that none of us really want to realise them at the expense of local voice for local decision making. People are quite rightly asking what happens to assets and debt. My view on that is simple. Communities should continue to benefit from the assets they've built and should not be unfairly burdened by liabilities created elsewhere. The exact mechanisms, whether through targeted rates, transitional debt arrangements or other financial tools, can be worked through during the detailed design phase after September 2026. The principle is simple. Reform needs to be fair to every community and no gold-plated footpaths at everybody else's expense. So that's it really, Waikato Together, the future. I see this as a wonderful opportunity to give the Waikato Economic Powerhouse region a chance to legitimately punch its weight in national affairs much more than it is doing now. As far as I can tell, most districts have been worrying so much about what they stand to lose, and with the traditional form of amalgamation, there is every risk of that, but losing sight of what there is to gain. Waikato Together is not intended as a finished blueprint, but instead as a conversation starter. And remember, it's the rule of the game that matters more than the players. If you've got a better way to strengthen regional government while giving communities more control over their own future, we'd all genuinely like to hear it. Waikato Together is not about redistributing wealth and creating a bigger council. It's about creating better government and redistributing responsibility. Because divided we are smaller, together we are stronger.